Hey, welcome to Simply Worldbuilding. Today, we're going to be moving to a new culture. Kind of picking at random, we were going to stick with some of the first few, and we decided with Yothurmiir, which is the mountainous continent to the north. A little bit of a colder place, home to this sort of dwarf-human mixture set of people. And we just wanted to start elaborating on that one.
Yeah, so a few of the things that we know about it already is that there's sort of like a very, very strong and like deep old relationship between the humans and the dwarves that both live there separately. That were, if I'm remembering correctly, two separate like kingdoms or nations.
Yes, yeah.
So what do you got for us on that front? If you want to give us a little bit of a recap.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much that I even like have elaborated just in my head, like, yeah, down pat about it. But yeah, definitely I think because they're a nation completely bisected by mountains, and so I think that was a very natural border at first. And as you know, a little bit further to the south, there's kind of like the general human population. I think it originally stretched up into Yothurmiir as well. I don't think they were necessarily the same country as oh my god, I forgot.
Firos?
Yeah, Firos. Yeah. I had the PH, I couldn't get it.
Fieri.
Yeah. Guy Fieros.
Welcome to Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dwarves.
But yeah, I don't think they were the same, but obviously just like the human species, it took that, like had that area. And then yeah, as you kind of wrapped around the mountains again and got into the more northern side of those mountains, it was where the dwarves sort of reigned. Now, during that time, okay, I have a thought and I want to run this by you because I don't even know either.
Run it.
I don't know exactly how far back I want to put the unification of these two groups of people into one. I know I want it to be far because I want them to be this sort of mixing of dwarves and humans to the point where it's mostly seamless. But I don't know how far back that needs to be.
Well, just a spitball, I was picturing that like Firos sort of started its roots and that kind of the civilizations that we come to know at this point in time were anywhere between like 1,000 years and like 600 years for maybe some of the younger ones.
Okay.
And then, of course, like when you go back over and you're looking at the city-states, that's a little bit more recent, like the sort of fracturing of that. But the Firos itself is probably almost 1,000 years maybe at this point.
Yeah, it does make me... Firos, I think, would also... Like, the Firos you know today wouldn't be the same as Firos even 200 years ago.
Totally.
Because of how many different cultures it has.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas I think Yothurmiir is going to have a little bit of a different take. Like, the Yothurmiir 500 years ago is probably going to be semi-similar.
Yeah, I think... I was going to say, actually, that, like, probably the, like, sort of old human portion of Yothurmiir was probably much more closely tied and
had relations,
like looked a lot more like what old Firos would have looked like. They probably would have been much harder to distinguish between the two. But then, like, sort of as you know, Firos started picking up more and more different culture and sort of morphing, that this place further away from this giant trade hub kind of stayed a little bit more like its thing until they sort of became more distinguishable.
Interesting.
And then they had their like little separation from there as well.
Yeah, so I think Yothurmiir as a separated nation, like between whatever the dwarves and humans were, was I would say is probably even older than that general 1,000 years. If Firos is within that sort of age range, Firos picking up steam sort of alienated the people to the north. And so it was probably around that 1,000-year mark where that sort of separation happened. But then the unification of Yothurmiir probably happened within that 1,000 to 900, maybe 800 years ago sort of instance.
Kind of was like, for a time, where it started to not really identify as much with Firos, or was just kind of far enough away where like it started to seem a little different. Then it sort of became its own identity for, you know, say 100, maybe 200 years or so, and then kind of like merged with the dwarven population up in the north.
Yeah, I don't even think like they didn't identify. Like I said, I don't want them. They're going to be separate countries, but they were probably like closer trade partners.
Yeah,
for sure than the people with the dwarves. And I kind of picture the dwarves within that sort of 1,000 years or so also like kind of coming out of the mountains. Like maybe they were sort of not isolationist or anything like that, but they stuck to the mountains, you know what I mean? And then in that time they've started to venture out down into, or probably even earlier, they started to venture out down into not the plains area to the south, but the flatter area still to the north. And then those two cultures collided probably within that sort of 1,000-year thing. They may have been at war for probably 100 years or so. And then whatever this sort of unification process is, probably happened around then. So I would say they were separate. It had the separation from the Feros area was probably in between like 1,200 to 1,000 years ago, because that's when Feros was kind of picking up steam. But it was still probably a collection of small places, but it started to get this sort of, it started to build up
identity and stuff like that.
And so the people, separated, and within that 1,000 to 800 years is when the unification happened. Okay, that makes sense, because I didn't know exactly how far I wanted it to be, and I was like, is it going to be pre the dragon slumbering in the mountains? And I was like, probably not.
No, I think that's ancient.
Yeah, totally.
But I was wondering if you had thought that this enormous dragon slumbering in the mountains maybe would have had something to do with why the dwarves left, like, the top or the interior of the mountains and out into the plains.
That's actually an excellent point.
Thank you. Because, it forces them from where they were out into, a maybe more hospitable place, but then also, a little bit into conflict with these people that kind of at least somewhat claimed that space already.
Maybe there was some sort of, I hesitate to say cataclysm, but there was definitely a disaster to do with the dragon. Maybe it almost woke up. Maybe it just had a little spit up in its sleep. Who knows? But maybe it shifted and caused some sort of earthquake. That would actually probably be the most likely. Is just like this dragon just kind of went.
Exactly.
and moved a bit, but that's huge. And so all of a sudden there's this huge earthquake. It probably thousands dead, and they were like, fuck, we can't stay in here. And so there was this mass exodus out into the open sky, where they started to live out there more permanently, and went back in, okay, it's it's still our home. They went back and started to rebuild.
Have these roots out there now.
Exactly. They've taken place. That's a good idea. I like that.
Cool.
And so it forced the dwarves out of the mountains and forced them to interact with the humans as well. So that's a cool idea too. So that would be a little place in history. And so the unification was basically something I pictured being sort of a, almost like a King Arthur kind of figure. The unification happened when this sort of king, or this person rather, who knows exactly who they were at this moment, just kind of brought members of both sides together. Exactly, and each of them sort of represented something like King Arthur's knights did, in order to show both sides that they're stronger together than apart. And so people take that very, very seriously, I think. The way I had sort of pictured that happening is, I don't know the number. I had a number in my head, and it was related to a symbol, but I'll have to see if I can find it again. Just from what I was trying to sketch out while I was brainstorming was...
For how many people were at the table kind of thing?
Well, how many... Yeah, because I think I had mentioned when we were originally spitballing Yothurmiir is that they were going to be... They're almost like religious figures to them at this point. Again, kind of like King Arthur's knights, like folklore. They were going to be called basically the saints. And then there was going to be pairings of dwarf human, dwarf human. Not necessarily on one specific side, male or female. It was going to be mixed, but they were again all going to represent something. There was going to be the saint of the hunt, the saint of stone, or the mine, or something like that. And they were all going to have their own representations as something in the culture, and they were basically going to be married to their counterpart. And the marriages of all of those, and the unification under the banner of the single sort of, again, King Arthur figure, was going to be that was the moment, was the unification of those people, and under this banner that the entire country banded together. At least, again, in folklore, if it happened exactly like that, who knows?
I think that it would also be interesting to have, I think actually, I don't remember if we put it on a video or not, But I think that we made at least a rough draft of what the like flag for this place would be.
Oh yeah, we did a little. I think we did a little doodle after an
Yeah.
episode when we were having fun with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be interesting if on their flag they did have, you know, like 8 stars or something like that, and those kind of represent like.
The symbol I wanted to use was some sort of Celtic knot.
Got it.
And
Got it.
and the amount of cross sections in the Celtic knot was going to be the represented.
Yeah.
How many? Now, I tried looking up Celtic knots. There's 100 different ways to do them and different styles, and considering it was going to be on a flag and something that was supposed to be represented to many people, I didn't want it to be super complex.
Totally.
But I wanted it to be more than just like 2.
Well,
2
keep in
cross
mind
sections.
that
Like,
children in elementary school are going to have to like color this flag, so it can't be too.
yeah, your Yothurmiir coloring book.
Yeah. As a child in Canada, trying to remember how many little thingies. What's the shape of a maple leaf? You know what I mean? Was that just me, or was
No,
that
you're so
half
right.
the time you draw a weed, half the time it's like just kind of a shape? Like it's.
Dude, Reddit can't get it right either.
No, for real.
I'm sorry, but these reference images that I'm going to have on the green screen are going to get us fucking canceled. Or at least, I mean, we're not going to get any closer to being monetized.
Yeah, for real.
But yeah, totally. So you do have to keep in mind. Well, it's got to be a simple symbol.
Yeah.
Because it's got to be something that everyone can grab onto, and so we'll nail that down in the future. I think.
Not important at the moment, but
because
just,
we'll have to go
brainstorm.
through it like it's a pantheon in a bit of a way. It's not going to be as complex, I don't think, but still. So yeah, I wanted to have this sort of Celtic knot and the cross sections, because like tying the knot is also like a thing for marriage, and so the cross sections are supposed to represent that. Either way, that's the symbol I was thinking of. But that's how I wanted the sort of folklore of this place to be structured. Is like, yeah, this unification was very important, and so what I don't want is resentment between both sides.
Totally.
I don't want it to be like, okay, like this begrudging alliance or anything like that. I want it to have been established strongly and continuously, so that we don't just get like human to dwarf like racism. I just don't want that. I want it to be a very unified place, but between these two people. Now, what that means for how things are run in the government, I think we'll touch on a little bit later, because I think I might actually want to figure out that sort of list of saints and everything before we figure, because I think how the government is run currently is going to be related to that very strongly. So we'll touch on that a little bit later. One thing to note, just geographically, like we probably touched on this a little bit on the map, but just to reiterate, there is the southern side of the mountains of Yothurmiir, and then the northern side of the mountains of Yothurmiir. And on the southern side, you're getting a little bit more of like the rolling hills. You might get a little bit of like the sort of an Irish or Ireland sort of
like the Highlands,
Scottish as well. Yeah. Sort of geography. But as you start to get up into the northern end, it gets much more jagged and mountainous and colder. Obviously, but so there's going to be sort of this strange just increase in elevation as you go, and so I think that's going to affect cultures as well. Like the northern area, I think, is still going to be more, it's going to cling more to its dwarven roots. Yeah,
they're gonna have probably a little bit more just like resilience to that kind of thing just in their blood, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then the southern end is probably going to be where you're going to find a lot more farmland rather than like really intense forests and
it's
stuff
a little
like
bit
that.
more flat, and the rain is going to run down into there, so it's able to actually be a little bit more fertile, and it's probably more soil instead of rock as well. So.
Exactly. And so these things are going to have to be things that we consider moving forward with how the culture works on one side of the mountains versus the other. Speaking of mountains, the mountains are going to be where the griffins come from.
The griffins.
And we know griffins and the like were going to be a very, very important piece of this culture. And so I think we should establish how.
Well, we had mentioned in the last episode, I actually mentioned that it was like a throwback, that we were kind of talking about coming of age in a bunch of different locations, because that's a pretty like
Common.
I don't know, it gives you a really like interesting and specifically unique glance into the culture of places, knowing kind of their coming of age thing, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, totally.
Like a
totally.
Sweet 16, except at the Sweet 16 you get a griffin.
Yeah.
That was way better than mine was.
Yeah, Sweet 16, you get a griffin and a beard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Here you go.
Yeah.
Squawk! Yeah. So, yeah, we had talked about that, and this, I think, we had mentioned is going to be kind of a similar thing. Like,
Yeah.
it's some sort of, like, rite of passage to go and, like, claim your griffin or whatever, right?
Yeah, we were definitely thinking that. I'm not sure exactly how common I want griffin riders to be, though. So we might want to save... I don't think it would be everyone. Like, not everyone's going to have your local griffin. And so making it a specific coming-of-age thing, like, all throughout... Maybe not. It might be sort of a higher society or militant thing.
Yeah, it's a coming of age for like, you know, nobles or something like that, where they can afford to do that kind of thing. Afford to be trained in doing it instead of having to toil in the mines all day.
Yeah, the one thing that's, I think, going to be kind of a through line with this place is the importance of like your clan and your family, because since that's such an important piece of folklore as well, and I think that's going to drip down into the government, like more than likely members of the government are going to be living members of the descendants of these marriages, and therefore like noble clans in that way. I think your family ties are going to be very important, and so there may be a select set of high class clans of people who are able to get these griffins and stuff like that. So it might not be a global thing, but it could be a coming of age thing among higher society or like, again, the militia or military.
Yeah, maybe like, yeah, exactly. If you're going to like soldier school and you pass your SATs with a score of 96 out of 100 or whatever, then you're eligible to become like a griffin rider knight or whatever, and then, you know, your next step is to go claim it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
Otherwise, maybe if you're noble, you could just straight up, you just get one. I don't know. But yeah, I do like the idea of it being a little bit more restricted, but also, I don't know, the idea that they're kind of just around and like, oh, the chosen hero, like, is...
selected by a griffin.
Exactly. Yeah, I like the idea that those storylines are available to somebody in this setting. The viewers at home, maybe. Like, they're around, and like, you know... Yeah,
maybe it wouldn't be like, oh, you're not allowed to have one, but it's probably like a tradition for these clans to go get them. But there are wild ones, and they absolutely exist.
Speaking of these wild ones, is now a good time to talk about like the different kinds of griffins that we were
yes, that was something I kind of wanted, is I wanted there to be like a decent amount of subspecies of griffin.
And maybe like also it's sort of like a distinction in like different clans and houses and families. It's like on their coat of arms or whatever, they've got the griffin with the swan head or something like that. But yeah, what did you have in mind for that?
Okay, so there's the obvious, there's the eagle lion. Okay, so that's our starting point. That one's going to be obvious. How that one's going to mix its way into society, I don't know off the top of my head yet. We could go the route of like using a hippogriff as an example and just calling it a different species of griffin. And so like the sort of eagle horse or hawk horse, or whatever it is, that's a possibility. Many moons ago, when I was younger, me and a group of friends thought of what we called the oos, which is a moose and a goose griffin. I love the oos. But where does it fit in the grand scheme of all of this?
I don't know, but it's very Canadian.
It's the northern. You can only find them in the northern half of Yothurmiir. In
the Great White North.
Yeah, exactly. I love that so much. But so that's a personal example. There's also, you know, like we could open up the possibility to like smaller types.
Totally.
Like they don't have to be like lion or horse-sized beasts. Like
Chihuahua.
The fiercest.
Teacup Yorkie.
Teacup Yorkie and a frickin' hummingbird.
I got my griffin, but it happens to be half Shih Tzu, half Chihuahua, little rat griffin.
It's so scary. It's like a puffin and a pug.
Yeah. Ooh, Puffin's actually such a good one, though, honestly.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh my god, my mind is just racing with like smaller birds.
Yeah.
It's so cursed. Man. I don't know. I'm so stuck on that puffin pug.
I know, it's a curse. Yeah,
it's sitting in my brain so hard. It's like I can't think of anything else now. I don't know. Maybe we can come back to that and think of it. I don't want there to be like a ton.
Yeah.
But there should probably be. I'd say max 10, but probably closer to 5 of like different types. And they should, like you say, they should have this sort of feeling of nobility to them still, unlike the puff and pug hybrid.
Yeah, it doesn't feel very regal.
Yeah. It feels like it's just gonna come out and then die.
Cursed existence.
Yeah, but yeah, so maybe we'll brainstorm on that one a little bit more another time. I think when we have, maybe we can take some time to pull up some reference or something like that.
But basically the gist is that there's different kinds of these griffins in different territories and regions in this country.
And they can represent like the lords of that sort of area.
Exactly, yeah. They'll have some sort of, symbolic meaning behind each of them.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, there'll be... But I kind of want to go back a little bit to the idea of like having wild griffins and stuff like that. I just want to reiterate. I think it's not illegal for you to own a griffin if you tame one, but it's just in the habit of noble houses and stuff like that because of like what a griffin means societally to go and get one. But like you say, like the hero chosen by the griffin is also like it's way too cool to pass up.
Yeah. Gotta leave yourself room for these little plot lines that make themselves. Not only so you can have interesting characters just in your world, but also if you are playing this as a game, leave yourself some of those options open so that your players can make up characters. Don't give yourself too many rules so that you leave some of those windows open for later.
Yeah, totally.
Dangling threads.
Dangle them. So I think there's going to be a bit of a flip side to these griffins as well. Because we mentioned along the mountains, especially near the dragon, there's going to be more dragon-like monsters.
Yes.
They're going to sprout, basically, because the dragon and in how this magic system works, like it is sort of the earth, but since it's a collection of magical energy, it is also changing the world around it. It's sort of one of these beasts almost becomes a domino effect in the fact that it is a amalgamation of like whatever magical energy was in the area, but now that it's formed, it's bringing more.
Yeah, it's got its own gravity.
Exactly, its own sort of gravity. And so I think, the drakes, the wyverns, even other smaller dragons and stuff like that are going to be prevalent in these mountains.
I think that the pseudo dragons, the little guys, I think it's a cool idea that those are like honestly kind of common, but they're not much more than like a pest. Like if you've got a farm and there's coyotes around, like they suck.
Yeah.
They'll eat your baby if you leave them outside, but like they're not like a catastrophe. But then there are actually like wyverns that are not like small that could actually pose a real threat, and like you need some kind of security like griffin riders or something to be able to patrol and defend from these things, because they are out there.
Well, and they feel like the perfect defense as well, because they also are these sort of grand beasts. They won't scale up to the size of a full-size dragon, but you have the advantage of flight as well. And so you having 3 griffin riders with the ability you have the ability to kill a large wyvern.
Whereas if you're just a guy on the ground, like good luck to you.
You've got to hope and pray that your arrow can reach that high and that you don't run it. Man, you ever tried to hit one of those dragons while they're moving in Skyrim? It's tough. It's cool when you do, but frick, I can't hit them. Some of you, I'm sure, are more skilled than me, but I can't hit them.
I've done it.
Yeah, it's possible, and you do, and then when they go like, and then they crash, awesome, I admit. But still, I would rather be on a flying mount.
That's valid.
I would rather be following along. And so having these griffins, it's a noble thing, but it also like kind of provides this implication of like military service as well, and like protecting your town from the dragons.
Yeah, totally.
And so I think, Griffin riders are still going to be dispersed throughout the land. You're not going to find too much of a concentration in like the main capital cities and stuff like that, but you will, because again, all of the nobles will flock there. But I think that definitely should be a thing. And the idea of like defending against the dragons of the mountains is going to be such a huge part of the culture as well. Now, what does that mean for this culture that respects the dragons? That specifically sits in Yothurmiir?
So, am I correct in remembering that they were not specifically related? Like, they're not citizens of Yothurmiir. They were, like, sort of like their own almost, like, tribe kind of kicking it up there in the mountains?
They're considered basically a city-state. As much as we've said that word many a time now, they're the probably best example on this continent of this is a city that's its own thing. They are dwarves. Like they were of the dwarves for sure.
But they're sovereign now.
Yeah, exactly, because they've chosen this very specific path. And I think that would be especially prevalent after like whatever sort of dragon earthquake happened 1,000-ish years ago. Their respect for the dragons is going to be something directly opposed to the rest of the dwarves.
Totally.
But I think since their role is going to be effective and important, they're still respected, and so it's not like they're at war over the whole idea.
Well, if anybody, like, I mean, I think at the very least there's kind of a respect for like, yeah, y'all are brave for hanging out up there, and like, but anybody who knows what they're up to up there knows that they are sort of pacifying this enormous beast. And you know, they could have been like the few that after this sort of like catastrophe happened where this thing, you know, roused a little bit, they doubled down on like, well, let's keep this thing happy and satisfied, and the other ones were like, let's get the hell out of here. Yeah,
it could have been some sort of war between the tribes originally that caused the rousing of the dragon, because they weren't able to keep up with their duty. But we can touch on that a little bit later. But yeah, I think they're respected as left up there, and they don't get bothered by the dragons either. They probably have dragon riders. But obviously wild dragons and wild griffins are going to be at odds just as the people may. But I think it may be kind of a taboo to like a dragon rider from their culture and like griffin riders to like face off. But I think they're far enough away where that's not, like, that would rarely ever happen. Because they're so high up in the mountains.
You would, in order to run into them, you'd have to be going to pick a fight, and nobody wants to go do that.
Yeah, totally. So just to kind of establish that, because they're going to be, very diametrically opposed, but I don't think they're going to be fighting.
There's nothing to gain for either of them.
There may be a tension just because, again, they have these sort of... They disagree on fundamental things, but I think that, they're going to be basically left alone, and it's for the better of everyone if everyone's at peace there, because firstly, that's a very important passage from in Yothurmiir, and then secondly, like you say, there's nothing to gain.
No, these people are up there, you know, chilling by their own. They're not hurting anybody. So why would you go up and pick a fight with people who can potentially ride with dragons if you don't want to live where they're living, and by leaving them alone, the dragon is chilled out.
The only thing I could think of is for the sake of control over the passageway, and control over and a perceived control over the dragon. You might, some batshit insane king might want to do that, but I just don't think it's likely at any point. That could be a plot
hook.
That could be a plot. But I just think in the general culture,
the history thus far,
I don't think it makes any real sense. So they're just so far out of the way and play such an important role that they're just like, okay, you guys can have that. You're left alone, and we're gonna stay down here.
And would put up such a fierce fight that it was not worth it.
No kidding. Like you probably got numbers on your side on the Griffin Riders,
because you're going up into the world's harshest terrain.
They got home field advantage.
And fucking dragons.
Exactly. My gun's bigger than yours. So yeah, just to kind of establish a little bit on the role of those people within the culture as well. And I do think the culture is going to vary quite a bit from one side to the other.
Yeah.
Purely because of the distance.
Yeah, you'll have different like diets and foods and stuff with what can grow in the south versus the north, or like up in the mountains anyway.
Yeah.
And like what they wear will heavily change, and therefore kind of like their disposition. You know, you got like the trope of like the grumpy northern farmer or whatever, just like grouchy because it's always just pissing rain and it's cold, and so is their disposition, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Whereas, yeah, you might get a little bit more of like the cheerful farmer from the fucking Shire, or just like really nice place like down on the bottom, because you are going to be a little closer to the equator once you get to the very bottom there. And so it's going to be, I think, relatively pleasant weather-wise.
Yeah, but also I think that, like, with sort of that trope of, like, oh, the Northerners being grumpy because it's so, like, cold out and stuff like that, there's also the flip side of the coin where I think that, like, there's going to be a part of their culture where, like, having, like, a guest or a visitor or something like that is taken very seriously. And, like, you know, the hospitality is so intentional and thorough, maybe, because of, like, if you invite somebody into your guest outside, like, or inside from like all of the rough elements and stuff like that, like they are under your protection, like you take it seriously, you give them everything you can, that kind of thing.
We don't have much to share, but we have to.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, that's kind of an interesting way to take it too, like, is that, you know, despite maybe sort of the, like, the southern portion of it kind of being perceived as more, like, free and, like, you know,
jovial,
sunny disposition and stuff, is that, like, the Northerners are truly kind in their own way, like especially when it comes to like guests and stuff like that, or some kind of thing like that, where like, you can see a difference, but they're also like still the same.
And they'll also have like this sense of community, I think.
Yeah.
You find that in a lot of northern places. Obviously, we live in one, but it's like it's such a. I mean, the Canadians are nice thing is a trope, I think, kind of born of the fact that when you're living in a harsher climate, especially like a cold climate, the community has to band together in order to get everyone through the winter. In Canada, like you're kind of considered a dick if you don't shovel your own snow. Plenty of people are dicks about it. Let me assure you. But yeah, if you know, you're supposed to shovel your driveway, like, and the sidewalk in front of your house, and if everyone does that, the sidewalk doesn't get icy. Like, it's one of those sorts of things where, like, yeah, they might have this more gruff disposition, but also at the same time, they're the people who put in the most work to make sure everyone's okay. Yeah,
they got a very different kind of kindness.
Yeah, exactly, and that's kind of an interesting distinction.
Yeah.
Instead of going, you know, south and north, if we go out to kind of the very tip of Yothurmiir, it's going to have quite a bit of a sailing culture, I think. But it's going to be small scale, I think. Because I picture, you know, fishermen among Yothurmiir.
Yeah, it seems like kind of possibly like it would be a pretty rough place to live, like pretty brutal. You're talking like rocky, windy as all hell. And so you get kind of the, like, I mean, I don't know, you haven't seen Game of Thrones, but like the Ironborn, like, salt of the sea, they're just like hard people doing the hard work. They take it seriously because it's brutal.
I can totally picture that. Like, there's probably only like one or two major ports where you will see major ships. Realistically, most of these places are going to be docks for fishing vessels and smaller scale stuff, because that not only is the place going to be inhospitable, but also I kind of picture it being, and I've never been, so this is purely based on my own conceptions, but kind of like Newfoundland. Newfoundland, Labrador sort of area, where like the small boat fishing is like kind of like, it's something you immediately picture. And so like you don't picture like huge major vessels. They're probably like, there's some, because obviously international trade is a thing. Like it's duh. But when I picture Newfoundland, I pictured the tugboats. I picture like the small fishing vessels and stuff like that. And I think that's going to be, and like the lighthouses and stuff like that. And I picture a lot of that at the end of Yothurmiir. But I don't think they're going to have like a navy or anything like that. Like they're not, well, they will, but it's not going to be,
But not centralized up there.
Feros is going to have a navy.
Yeah.
Feros is going to have a fuck-off navy.
Yeah.
Like, but Yothurmiir, I picture if they're going to go to war, they're probably... If someone's invading them, they're like, all right...
Step on land then, brother.
Come
Get up here.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. I got the high ground, bitch.
Yeah.
What the hell are you going to do about it?
exactly.
And so that's another thing to kind of touch on as well. Is, I think I pictured, at the very end, like you could say like the capital city, because I pictured that being sort of at the tip of the place as well, because that's kind of where the cultures,
and that's
that's where the cultures meet on a geographic scale, and so I think it's probably going to be somewhere there, and you could picture it being on the coast. So okay, that's a major port for sure. Maybe another one like halfway down to Feros for sure. But for the most part, like major naval stuff probably not going to be much of a thing. And so they're probably going to have a cool fishing culture and stuff like that, and just the general gruffness, like you said.
I think you also kind of picture like also, especially up in the north, where your go-to resource is kind of like mining and minerals and gems and things like that. And I assume that that's probably going to be a pretty big part of maybe their culture, but especially their economy is like coming from the north. Like maybe there's a little bit less going on for trees. Maybe there's a little bit less going on for farming because of just the environment. But you can always go into the mountains and smack the earth and come out with some valuables.
Yeah, we might want to put a port up by up there though, because also the ability to ship those minerals globally is going to be
transport them so long.
Yeah, especially because you're not going over the top.
Yeah,
you're not going over the top with something super major.
Yeah,
some people might
cart full of goods.
Yeah, like some people may risk it, but that's not going to be the primary.
Yeah,
that's not going to be the primary stance, and so there may be like one major port, and they call it major only because it can technically accept ships. But it realistically is not gonna. It's not gonna be doing a lot of traffic.
Yeah, and maybe it's the kind of thing where like it ices up at portions of the year. And
and
stuff
so
like
well, that's what I was thinking. It was like you're gonna have to have basically icebreaker ships.
Yeah, I was thinking like they got an icebreaker ship and like they're trying to clear out the port of all the ice or whatever so they can get their shipment of food in or that kind of thing. That's
maybe there's only 2 ships that are actually able to make the journey year round, and even then that's going to be sketchy.
Yeah,
maybe there was 3 and now there's only 2.
Yeah,
that would just a little bit of lore you could drop in there, and so in the warmer months, we can make our shipments up there, but as soon as the frost starts to take hold, you can't make it, and so it's going to be like a risky sail. That could also be a fun plot. Your players trying to get from follow a shipment or escort a shipment. Everyone loves escort missions.
We love escort missions.
But trying to escort something down there, or make it, or even just be on the ship and make it down there faster than they would otherwise, because they don't want to take the other route. The sailing, I've heard a decent handful of like old ships getting caught up in the north stories, and they're brutal, but they're so interesting.
People start eating each other and hallucinating and stuff like that.
It's
interesting stuff.
It's so crazy. But that's just a plot waiting to happen.
Totally.
It looks like for time we're probably gonna have to cut it off here. In the next few episodes we'll probably elaborate a little bit more on the general folklore. Like I do want to kind of
really flesh this area out now as we do our second pass over.
Yeah.
But I think we got a good amount for today.
Yeah, definitely. I think so too. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you in the end card.
Bye. Hey there. Welcome to the end card. Today, I think we're going to do a little bit of a challenge time. So we were thinking, make a griffin. You can do like... Drop 2 griffins in the comments for us here. Do one that's terrible, like the pug puffin.
Super cursed.
Super cursed. And then make one that actually seems kind of cool. And we're still open to ideas about the griffins here, so...
Yeah, we haven't nailed that down yet.
If it's cool and it feels real and accurate, we might use it. No problems, but we'll definitely read it. And maybe we'll put them up here in the next episode. And... if our lovely editor and producer Corey is feeling up to it, maybe he'll make it with an image. But that's all we got for you today. Have some fun with it. Let us know. And don't forget to like this, subscribe, and check us out on our Instagram and Spotify. Thank you.
See ya.